He didn't chase celebrity. He was the antithesis of that. So that mystery about him is, I think, part of the appeal, because when you come on to his music, it's a unique connection that you make with him that's lasting. You can't help but feel like, what would have come next? That's a real emotional thing. I think it deepens the connection that people have for this music.
Rock, metal, prog, and everything in between. Welcome to this episode of Talkin' Rock with Meltdown. Don't forget to follow the audio-only Talkin' Rock podcast on all podcast platforms. And now, it's time for today's conversation. Here's Meltdown.
Hey, John, good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, March 22nd at the Fox Theater, of course, Experience Hendrix. Now, you've been to the Fox Theater before, correct?
Many times. It's a great audience. We love playing there. So they've always been so supportive of our tour.
Yeah, that's one of the somebody asked me the other day, like, what's your favorite venue in the area? And even though I've only been there a handful of times, the Fox Theater, to me, just the aesthetics, everything about it is so fantastic. I was there for the last Soundgarden show at that venue. That's where the last show was played.
I think we've probably played there 5 times, and it's really one of the best places. The Seattle Paramount Theater is special for the Hendrix family being from Seattle, but certainly Chicago Theater, the Fox Theater in Detroit, those are magical spots for us. The crowd has always been so enthusiastic. It's really, it's special for our artists. To be a part of that energy is really, really unique.
Now, Joe Bonamassa, he's told me several times he thinks it's one of the nicest places in the world that he's played in. He's played in a few places, and of course, you're probably friends with Joe.
Yes. Yeah. I think the thing with the Fox that, is that you got that's a fan base out there that loves music. You feel it. There's an energy to that building. This isn't like playing a performing arts center where maybe this is just one show of 20 that you subscribe to or anything like that. These are fans that want to come out and hear this music. And I think what's been great is that because we've played there so many times over the years, that fans know that it's going to be special, that we're going to bring in guests that that aren't even on the bill. There's all kinds of those things. So it kind of feels like they're in on it with us. So that's a real special vibe.
Now, before we get into the concert and who's coming and all that kind of stuff, people should know that you're the catalog director for Jimi Hendrix, and I guess for the Hendrix Experience LLC for nearly 30 years. And I guess the first question, and excuse me for the hack question, you've probably been asked this a million times, but how does one become the catalog director for Jimi Hendrix?
Well, what's interesting is that I had written a book about Jimi Hendrix with Eddie Kramer back in 1992 called Hendrix Setting the Record Straight. The year after, we decided to do a tribute record called Stone Free, a tribute to Jimi Hendrix. It had Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck, Buddy Guy, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden on it. A lot of great artists. And that the purpose of that was to set up scholarships in Jimmy's name at the United Negro College Fund, which it did. It still continues to do so to this day. But in the aftermath of that, Eddie and I had gone back to our various projects, working on with different artists, things like that. We found out that the Hendrix family were entered into this major litigation because their lawyer was trying to sell Jimmy's music out from under them to MCA Records. So I volunteered in that process. It was a 2-year legal process that was, involved a lot of hard work and trouble, but the Hendrix family in the end won everything back, and in 1995 asked me to work with them to manage the catalog going forward and to pull in all of Jimi's Hendrix and to help bring it out to his global fan base. And we've been doing that really. I think our first release was 1997, and we've been going since then.
And how much stuff is there still left in the vault after all these decades?
We're definitely, we have used a great deal of it for the releases that we put out, the documentaries that we've put out. So certainly we've shared a great deal of it. There's always something. What's interesting about Jimi Hendrix is his historical significance. So I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we got word that there was a recording of Jimi and the Experience at the Hollywood Bowl in August of '67. So what was fascinating about that was that this was just after he had kind of left the Monkees tour. They were stumbling around trying to get going. Are You Experienced hadn't even been released in America yet. So to have a recording like that, we were able to acquire it and share it with fans and put it out on an album, CD, streaming, all of those things. So anytime something like that comes up, we try to pounce on it. But in terms of the music that he created, we've shared a great deal of it. There are still some wonderful things to come, but we're certainly far closer to the end of that than we were, say, 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah. Now, I've interviewed guys. I want to say James Young said he saw Hendrix like 3 or 4 times, which is unbelievable to me. Did you ever get a chance to see him live?
I didn't. I came to it just after, so for me, the early posthumous records like Cry of Love and Hendrix in the West, they were my introduction to Jimmy. So I did not get to see him. He had passed by that time. But, I do remember seeing the original Warner Brothers film called Jimi Hendrix, and to see him on a big screen, at a big screen in a theater at that time was incredibly powerful. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to have seen him, as others were lucky enough to do on a stage. That would have been tremendous.
Yeah. Do I recall correctly? Did Lemmy from Motorhead actually roadie for Jimmy a few times?
Yeah, a few times. I mean, he filled in. I mean, it's funny. Jimi Hendrix had a very skeleton crew, so there were times when they would, have somebody come in and help them out. But Lemmy wasn't out there for a couple of years or anything like that. I think he did a handful of shows on an as-needed basis, particularly when they were in the UK.
Yeah, that's amazing. Some of the stories and stuff. And it's now, like you said, Experience Hendrix. This tour has been very successful, hasn't it, with all these great guitar players?
Yeah, I mean, this was the Experience Hendrix tour is an idea that I'd had about 20 years ago, and Jimi Hendrix really embraced it. And for us, it was about celebrating the songs. That's the common denominator with audiences is this, what we see when we do shows like this is that you might come because you love Zakk Wylde, but you come out of there blown away by an Eric Johnson or a Marcus King or any of these artists, Samantha Fish, Chris Stone, Kingfish Ingram. They're all coming at it from different ways, which really speaks to the breadth of Jimmy's influence. I mean, he touches these artists differently, and within the musical realm that they're in, they then share that with the audience. The fun part about our show is the collaborative nature of it. So you get to see these guys playing together. So it isn't a freewheeling loose jam session. I mean, you're going to come and you're going to hear the songs you love, but you're going to be, invariably you're going to come out of there impressed with a guitarist or a singer that you're unaware of that really made an impression on you. Because the songs are good, they have your attention, and then it's the artistry that really brings it home.
And you just mentioned Marcus King. This is his first time on this tour?
It is. Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of folks we try to involve in our tour, but, in this post-COVID world, artists are really out there busy touring. You mentioned Joe Bonamassa. I mean, Joe's a guy who, we'd love to have, we have not been able to have, but, we try, we don't do this on an annual basis. We actually haven't done it since 2019. Last year in the fall, we did the West Coast. Now we're in 25, we're doing the East Coast. It's been 6 years since we've done it. So, we just try to find a window when the artists are available, and then we lock that down. So in this instance, it was mid-March to mid-April, and we were able to get 1 month of touring out there. And, for the guys, they enjoy it. For them, it's a break from their own careers, the pressure of having to, continue to tour and release records and do things. They love the hang. They love the fact that they're celebrating Jimmy. He's a common influence for everybody. So, it isn't a hard ask. We actually get a lot of people asking us, hey, can we be a part of it? But there's only so many hours on stage we can have before we got to get out of there.
Yeah, and so many dollars to spread, I'm sure. What's his name? Kenny Wayne Shepherd. He's talked to me several times about his influence with Hendrix, and I think he held or played one of the guitars he played at Woodstock or whatever it was.
He did.
Yeah,
absolutely, he did. Yeah, I mean, there's a permanent exhibit in Seattle at a museum that Paul Allen founded. It's now called Mopop. And they have a guitar, one of Jimmy's original guitars, and very kindly let us use it. In fact, we did it again this past September in Seattle at the Paramount, and artists got to play his guitar, and it's a really nice touch. It's just, again, it kind of brings home the unique nature of what we're trying to do with this show. It's something fun. There isn't an album from it. We're not there. You know what I mean? It's really just celebrating Jimi Hendrix's music. We don't have a living artist to go out there and do that. So by doing things like this, where it's really about the music, it isn't just, hey, buy the album. It's more of like, hey, dig Jimi Hendrix. So, that in itself helps you keep Jimmy's music going.
Now I see you got gold records and stuff behind you. Do you yourself have any Jimi Hendrix artifacts?
I'm not. I was never a collector. I just appreciated his music. It just was something to me that I found his life and career fascinating. It's why I wrote about him. It's why I continue to really love the job that I do, being able to tell that story because he's a guy that in 4 years had an enormous impact. You can't even imagine what would have happened in the years after his death, but you see it today. I mean, successive generations look at him as a signature artist. Like he's one of those guys like the Beatles, like Led Zeppelin that endures because to young people, he sounds fresh. He's unique. He's different. And I think that the way that he attracted you and me and others didn't really matter where you lived, whether you could be from Europe, you could be here, anywhere. But there's something about the music and his presentation of it that connects.
Yeah, when you were saying that only 4 years and stuff, I immediately flashed to Randy Rhoads, another guy just like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the thing that, there are certain artists that make an impression. And certainly it isn't just artists who pass away. There's a tragedy to that because you realize you're not going to hear more from Randy Rhoads that would have built on that legacy. I think the same thing is true with Jimi Hendrix. I mean, we just put out a box set and a documentary about the creation of Electric Lady Studios, for example. And, that's kind of a little known fact that, here's a recording studio, the first commercial recording studio ever done by an artist. I mean, now everybody and their brother has a home recording studio, but for Jimi Hendrix, that was a big deal when he started it in 1969. That's a studio that Taylor Swift uses today. So it just goes to show you that no matter the genre, he still has that ability to get people to, people recognize, oh, that's a special place. Jimi Hendrix was a part of that. That actually means something. There's real currency there.
Yeah, it's great. Like I was just thinking about this. Zakk Wylde, of course, going out on tour with Pantera, paying tribute to Dimebag and VP as well, and now going out, and celebrating the legacy of Hendrix. These guys, not only these guys were influenced, but they really show like just the reverence for all these artists.
Reverence is a great word because that's what it is. I mean, there's a fascination with it. There's a curiosity about it. I mean, Jimi Hendrix was even though when you see footage of him, he's a very extroverted guy as a stage performer, but off the stage, he was a very quiet, shy guy, completely dedicated to his music. He didn't do a lot of interviews. He didn't chase celebrity. He was the antithesis of that. So that mystery about him is, I think, part of the appeal because when you come on to his music, it's a personal connection that you have with it. You're not because you saw a video of him, the way like Thriller with Michael Jackson, where now forever you're thinking of that. Yeah. He wasn't part of that thing. It's a singular, it's a unique connection that you make with him that's lasting. I think young people do it certainly with Randy Rhoads. When you lose somebody that has unique talent, you can't help but feel like what would have come next. That's a real emotional thing. I think it deepens the connection that people have for this music.
Yeah, and I forgot about this until you brought it up, but yeah, he toured with the Monkees, which seems very bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. When he went to England, he was an unknown, and he was struggling in Greenwich Village. Chas Chandler from the Animals discovered him, brought him there, produced those early records. It was Paul McCartney who recommended to Monterey that you got to have this guy at your festival. So they made their American debut at Monterey. Well, of course, Jimmy's manager, he saw how popular the Monkees were while he was still in England, didn't really understand who they were popular with,
right.
But he thought this was going to be a great opportunity. Well, 8 shows later, Jimmy was off that tour. But it's one of those things that in a way only would have happened back at that time. There was such a Wild West nature to, management and music careers. I mean, it's like, okay, great. We'll put them on with the Monkees. They'll draw big crowds and it'll be a quick way to get people to know who he was. Those crowds really were completely overwhelmed by who Jimi Hendrix was.
No, I can imagine. Hey, I don't begrudge him for hopping on that tour because just like you said, it's like the Monkees, this is before my time, but from what I recall, they were huge. And it's like, why wouldn't you hop on that tour?
Well, I think the tough part is that, for a lot of the Monkees fan base at that time were young, very young, kind of preteen kids. And I think that, Jimmy Jimmy was somebody who saw himself as a contemporary electric blues artist and forwarding that kind of music. So, his volume, his stage presentation, all those things were the complete opposite of what, parents taking their kids to a monkey show were expecting.
Like we were saying, March 22nd at the Fox with Experience Hendrix. Talk about Jimmy and the and just the cultural ether. I mean, the one of the things I think of right off the top of my head is Hulk Hogan coming out to Voodoo Chow. Talk about some of the other things that really has just kept Hendrix alive.
Well, I think every generation looks at Hendrix, and I think artists from every generation look at Hendrix. I don't care whether you're Prince, whether you're Stevie Ray Vaughan, whether you're John Mayer. I mean, you name it. They feel Hendrix's influence and they represent it to the audience. You go see Paul McCartney today, he still talks about his interaction and friendship with Jimi Hendrix. So it just, even if you're curious about the music, it's those references and those instances, like you say, with Hulk Hogan, where you're like, wait a minute, who's this guy? And I think that's what is part of the appeal. Because the music is good, you don't have to hard sell it to people. All you have to do is put it out there. For a lot of people, it's seeing it in a movie, it's hearing it in a commercial. It's, there are many, many ways, getting it via radio. But once you hear it, you're like, damn, who's that guy? Mm.
Now, do you have a some sort of influence on how Jimmy's music gets used? Like, for example, if a movie comes to you and they want to use it or something, does that have to go through you or
No, for the most part, those are decisions made by Jimi Hendrix and the Hendrix family. I think they look at that and at each of those opportunities. My focus is on the music catalog, preparing the albums and the documentaries, and then of course the tour.
And will you go to all the tour dates?
Yes, of course. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, we hand select the artists. We pick the songs. We work with them on that. It's a fun thing. As much as I say, Kenny Wayne calls it summer camp for everyone, it is for us too. I mean, it's a great hang, and we love being with, like-minded folks who just dig music and certainly dig Jimi Hendrix.
But when you go to all the tour dates, do you yourself go on stage and talk about Hendrix a little bit, or do you?
No.
You're all behind the scenes.
I don't want to drive the people out of the theater, my friend. We help organize it and put it together and bring it to the stage, and then we let the artist do the heavy lifting.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, what other guitar players have you worked with or written about?
Well, I've been fortunate. Buddy Guy is someone with whom I've done many projects with. I've had the good opportunity to work with Steve Winwood, Eric Clapton, Otis Rush, a bunch of other people, Doyle Bramhall II, Robert Randolph, many, many guitarists. I love music, and certainly blues has always been a root for me. So, I'm always looking at interesting projects that, I'm intrigued by.
Now, being in this business for 35 years, I couldn't have ever imagined as a kid I'd meet this guy or that guy. And I've met most of my heroes, actually probably all of them, and had interactions with them, interviewed them, and whole kind of thing. I mean, is that how it is for you? Like, you can't believe, like, you're meeting, like, for example,
100%,
like 100% or somebody, yeah.
Without question, and when you develop friendships with them, and you're able to. It's funny from a blues perspective. Being on tour buses with Buddy Guy and Hubert Sumlin, who played with Howlin' Wolf. Hearing those stories of that music that you grew up loving, and then you move it forward and being able to know Jeff Beck and listen to him and Mick Taylor. There are just so many wonderful players. But then you move that timeline forward, and it's Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Doyle Bramhall II, Johnny Lang. There are so many wonderful folks that are out there that come at music in a way that, for me as a writer and a producer, is always fascinating to hear, because this isn't a singular pursuit. It's a varied thing. People hear it and they then reflect what they've heard in a way that's unique to them. So for me as a fan, I'm always intrigued by that kind of route. Like, where did that come from? And learning that when you work with the artist is really a lot of fun.
Can you believe that every day you get to wake up and do this for a living?
Lucky guy, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I love music, and so for me to be able to play a role, at the end of the day, you never lose sight of the fact that people love Jimi Hendrix because it's Jimi Hendrix. I mean, I think if there's anything that we take from it, would be just the knowledge, or that fans appreciate the effort and the time we put into the things that we do. I mean, that's the reward. But it's an honor. It really is, because this is special stuff. I mean, I think if you look now we're 50 plus years away from its original creation. You still see generation after generation look to the Beatles, look to Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin. They're the guys that make that connection with people. It's a timeless thing. So to be a part of it is really an honor.
Yeah. And I think maybe almost 60 years, right? Because 50 years would have been 1975, and Jimmy was long gone by then.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, 50 plus, you're right. 60 years without question. I mean, look at this point, you're thinking it's almost 70 with the Beatles. We're getting to that point. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. It's crazy. Now I'll ask you a question that people ask me all the time. And I'll ask you, do you play an instrument? People ask me that all the time.
Well, I could play, and but the passion for playing, for me, just wasn't there at the same level as writing about music, working with musicians, doing projects, filming them, those kinds of things, because I just felt that was an opportunity for me to be more interactive with the process as opposed to kind of creating my own music. But I learned enough to know that I shouldn't play. I guess that's probably a better way of describing it.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. I just watched that documentary just about a few weeks ago. Somebody suggested to me Norm's Rare Guitars. Have you seen that? You've probably been in there a bunch of times, right?
No, I've never. I'm aware of the shop. I know people who go there, but I have not seen it. I had it recommended to me, but I have not seen it.
Okay. Speaking of guitars, how many of Jimmy's guitars are still in existence?
What's interesting is that Jimmy was an off-the-rack guy. He was not a collector, didn't have 100 guitars. I mean, he traditionally would have a black Fender Stratocaster, a white Fender Stratocaster, and a Flying V, or, at times he had a Les Paul Jr., things like that. Gibson, he would tend to play for blues songs. So, you've seen footage of him playing his Flying V, at the Isle of Wight or places like that, where, playing things on Red House, songs like that. But, he was a guy that could take any guitar, flip it over, and just rip.
Wow.
Restring it and rip. Yeah, he was not somebody who, like Otis Rush or others who, didn't even restring. He would restring it, but he would play a right-handed guitar, flip it over, restring it, and he could just play it.
Yeah, that's great. Now, how much stuff does that Seattle museum have of his?
Well, it has a great deal. And, when Jimmy's dad, Al Hendrix, was a wonderful man, one of the things that he wanted after his death was that Jimmy's things to be shared with his fans. So, there's always a museum, there's something at the Smithsonian, there's a permanent exhibit at the Rock Hall, at Mopop in Seattle, at European museums. So it's important for the Hendrix family to kind of share those stage clothes, like guitars, things of that nature. But the museum in Seattle actually is quite interesting in that, the Hendrix family, brought in like the record player, that his father's record player that he would, play records on, like, a lot of the things that you've seen in pictures you get to see, the famous kimono that he wore, when he was on the Dick Cavett show, things like that. You can see that stuff on display. And I think for fans, it helps, turn this, make him more of a 3D life figure as opposed to this kind of one-dimensional icon guy that you read about.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, John, thank you so much for your time. The Experience Hendrix tour, that comes March 22nd here at the Fox in Detroit. And, of course, like you were talking about, the Electric Lady Studios at Jimi Hendrix Vision. The box set is out right now. And I don't know, you kind of teased us a little bit. There's still a little bit left in the tank as far as some Hendrix rarities, eh?
Well, there is, but I mean, this box set that we just did was it took a long time to bring to fruition, and it's an important project for us. So, that's our primary project right now. I mean, going down the road, we'll certainly look at opportunities to share some things, which we hope will give, fans a deeper appreciation and understanding of his music. But, that's our main project right now. So, as I say, look, if somebody out there has a tape of Jimmy at the Cobo Hall, please let us know. but I mean, right now, the Electric Lady Studios project is really our primary focus.
Well, John, thank you so much for your time. Safe travels. We'll see you here in March.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.